Hey everybody, happy summer and weekend, and welcome to the online edition of The Gathering. My name is Nick, and we're glad that you are taking a few moments here today to spend some time with us. It's a beautiful summer in the Pacific Northwest. I just got back from camping all week, and okay, it did downpour rain on us on Monday, but the rest of the week has been glorious. This whole next week is supposed to be incredible here in the Pacific Northwest. So wherever you are, I hope that you are enjoying this summertime. It's a great time to get out and to have some fun and just enjoy this incredible place that we live. Now, getting to the stuff that we're here to do today, if you are interested in learning more about this church, this group that you have stumbled on, you can go to our website at everettgathering.com. And what you will learn there in short is that this is a partnership between two churches, actually, Zion Lutheran Church and Pathways Church, non-denominational, independent, low church, overall not nearly as formal and as liturgical as Zion Lutheran Church. Two churches that come from very different backgrounds and have different traditions and styles and all of that, but have come together and decided that the things that we value together are more important than any differences that we might have. And what a crazy idea that perhaps people who have some differences in ways that they do things might be able to come together for the benefit of all and work together in partnership. And so that's what this group is all about. If you want to learn a little bit more about those core values that hold us all together, you can go to the website, as I said, at everettgathering.com. You can read up a little bit about it there. And we're just really proud and of this group and everything that we've been able to do together. And we think that you might be inspired by that too. So you can check that out. Now, the thing we use to describe ourselves every week is two words: cautious and curious. I say this every week, but you know what? Different people tune in here at different times, and if you're kind of trying to get a little taste of who we are as a group, I feel like this kind of might cover it. We are a cautious group in that many of us grew up in organized religion or around religion. And we've seen religion used in some ways that's very helpful, positive, beneficial, inspiring, even good. But many of us have also seen religion used in some ways that's really harmful, that's hurt people around us, our own friends, family members, some of us personally. We've seen religion used in a way that's very exclusionary. And so many of us in the group are at least cautious about organized religion. Some would go so far as to say skeptical of organized religion. And you say, well, okay, that's weird because this is a church, so by definition, you guys are sort of an organized group of religious people. And yes, you are right about that, and that does seem weird, but we actually think that that tension is a really healthy tension to live in, because we do find ourselves a little cautious about being an organized group of religious folk while at the same time being an organized group of religious folk. And we think that's a really healthy tension. Now, the other word we use to describe ourselves is curious. And by that, we mean we like to ask a lot of questions. And what that sort of default suggests is that we don't think we have all the answers. Our group doesn't list out a bunch of things that you have to believe in order to join our group, because we just don't think we have all the answers settled down so far as to think that there aren't other differing views and opinions and ways of thinking and believing out there. And so we're always curious about how other people read the Bible text, how they interact with God, what they think about spiritual matters. We're curious about those things, and we like to ask a lot of questions about our own personal beliefs, because we've discovered that when we ask questions about the things that we thought we already had answers to, that we often discover some things that we weren't prepared for, or we discover some new ways of thinking that might expand our relationship with God. So we're a group that likes to ask a lot of questions that way. So if either of those two words, cautious or curious, resonates with you, then this might be a good group to continue to check out. Now, what we're going to be doing here over the next couple moments is, first of all, our worship leader Billy is going to come on the screen. He's going to lead us in a song. And after he does that, you can sing along to it if you want, or if you just want to listen to the music, that's fine. He's just going to do one song today. And then after that, we are going to be kicking off this series for the next couple weeks that follows along with our kids ministry material, because we've invited our first graders and up into our regular adult gatherings on Sunday mornings in our in-person gatherings. And so we are going to take some of their curriculum, which has to do with the study of wisdom here in the month of August, and we're going to look at some of their curriculum. We're going to tweak it for adults a little bit, but because they're going to be with us, we're going to give you a chance to peek and see at some of the material that kids are learning. And also, it'll give kids a chance to connect with some of the stuff that we're doing as adults. And so the theme this month is wisdom. And we have a video that is one of the kids' story videos that we'll play at first. It's just a couple minutes long, and then we'll jump into our sermon text. So that is where we are going today, and I think we might as well get right to it because we have a lot to cover. So let's let Billy come on the screen, lead us in the song, and I'll see you back here in just a couple minutes.
Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. Sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. Sing with all we are and claim your victory. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, let faith be a song that overcomes the raging sea. Let faith be a song that calms the storm inside of me. Let it rise. Let faith arise. Let it rise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, this is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you bring down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, God, we give you
And now for an amazing true story from the book of 1 Kings, chapter 3, verses 4 through 28.
David was one of the best kings to ever rule God's people. He had many sons, but not all of them followed God, so before he died, he chose one of his younger sons, Solomon, to be the next king.
Be strong. Do everything that God requires. Live the way He wants you to. Then you will have success in everything you do.
Okay, Dad. I'll do my best. So when King David died, Solomon became the new king of Israel.
Oh, wow. This throne is really tall. What would you like to do first, King Solomon?
I'm not really sure. I think maybe I should start by thanking God for everything he did for my father and for making me king. So King Solomon traveled to the city of Gibeon. He was so grateful, he offered 1,000 sacrifices to God.
Perhaps we need a bit more wood for the fire.
Late that night, as Solomon dozed by the light of the dying fire, God appeared to him in a dream. Ask me for anything you want me to give you. Solomon took a deep breath. God was offering to give him anything he could imagine. Anything at all. I could ask to be rich. I could ask to have an entire castle made from gold. A silver swimming pool. A diamond climbing wall. The young king considered other things he could request too. After all, God's people had many enemies. I could ask for the greatest army ever. We could defeat all our enemies, and I'd be the most powerful king in the world. But even as these thoughts rushed through Solomon's mind, he knew what he truly needed. God, you have been very kind to my father David, because he was faithful to you. Now you have made me king in his place, but I'm only a little child compared to him. In his mind, Solomon pictured all the people of Israel. There were so many, and they all expected him to lead them and keep them safe. I don't know how to carry out my duties. I'm here among the people you have chosen. They are a great nation, more than anyone can count. So, please give me wisdom and a heart that understands. Then I can tell the difference between right and wrong and rule over your people. Solomon released a long breath. He could only hope he had made the right choice. You have not asked to live for a long time, or for great wealth, or even for your enemies to be killed. Instead, you have asked for wisdom. You want to do what is right and fair when you judge people. Because that's what you've asked, I will give it to you. I will give you a wise and understanding heart. There will never be anyone like you. Solomon could hardly believe his ears. God was going to give him exactly what he had asked for. But there was more. I will also give you what you have not asked for. I will give you wealth and honor. As long as you live, no other king will be as great as you are. Live the way I want you to, like your father David did. Then I will let you live for a long time. Yes, I will. Thank you, Lord. Solomon awoke with a gasp. Before him, the last coals of the fire were still glowing. One of his advisors stood nearby. Are you all right, my king? I've been dreaming, but I know it was real. I know God spoke to me. Everything that God had promised Solomon came true. Rulers from surrounding countries sent him amazing gifts, and he built a brand new glorious temple for God and a beautiful palace for himself. But more importantly, God had made Solomon so wise that everyone trusted his decisions. Kings from nations all over the world heard about him and sent their people to listen to him. Solomon had become one of the greatest men to ever live, just because he chose to ask God for wisdom.
All right, that's our video today as we are getting kicked off with this Family Month series here in August about wisdom with that great story there from Solomon, who has an incredible dream. Now, if God came up to you and asked you and said, you could have anything in the world, what would you ask for? Well, I think that happened to me this week. All of a sudden, we were out camping, and I had this conversation with God, and it was like God was saying, whatever it is that you want, ask it from me, and I will give it to you. Wow, incredible, right? And so, of course, the one thing that I asked for was that the Oregon Ducks would win the national championship this year. And this was incredible because God had just asked me, what's the one thing I want? And I told him it is that the Oregon Ducks would win the national championship this year. And then just like that, I woke up. It was only a dream, right? Could you imagine that? You're having a dream and it's just like, okay, what is the one thing that you want? And you say it and you wake up and it actually comes true. Okay, well, that was just a dream. That wasn't a real experience with God. But that's our story today, right? That Solomon has this dream where God is willing to grant him anything that he wants, and he asks for wisdom. Now, we're doing this series called Dig Deep, and it is the series that the kids would be using this month in August, and it's built around the theme of wisdom. And I think this is actually pretty good for all of us to come together on, because that's something we all need, adults and kids, right? We need wisdom. For kids, it's a pretty good topic. I mean, for a lot of young people, you kids, you don't have a lot of life experience yet, right? And so it's hard to make good decisions because you're still learning about consequences, good and bad, and how to make good decisions. And for adults, though, we have more life experience, but we struggle to make good choices too, even though we're older. Our choices, well, we got more of them. You know, for kids, a lot of the things are already chosen for you, but for adults, there's a lot of more choices for us to make, and a lot of them have heavier weight to them than choices we make when we're younger. And so as adults, our lives are very complicated with lots of important decisions to make. And so this is probably a good topic for all of us, but it might actually be best to approach this topic of wisdom from the perspective of a child, because as adults, well, we tend to overcomplicate things, and wisdom might be more simple than we believe. Now, our story today, as told on the video there, is a famous one from one of the most famous kings in Israel's history. It's the story of Solomon. And while that video does paint Solomon and David in maybe a rosier light than many of us as adults know the story is a well-known story, even if you did not grow up in church, and it is the story of Solomon's dream. Solomon goes and has a little nap, and God visits him, and he's willing to give him whatever Solomon wants. So let's read it together. Let's read the actual text, okay? It's in 1 Kings chapter 3 is where you get this story. And we'll read most of what was in the little video there, starting in verse 4. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. Wow, that's a lot. Might be some exaggeration there. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Verse 6, Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant David, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on this throne this very day." Now, I'd like to stop right there for a moment here and kind of clue you in on this scene a little bit. Solomon here, it's kind of important that you understand this. Solomon is making sacrifices in order to kind of get God's attention. He shows up there and he goes to this high place, which, by the way, the Bible writers later kind of condemn that for not being a great idea. But he is offering 1,000 sacrifices, it says, which is probably an exaggeration. But it's just the idea here that Solomon is really trying to get God's attention. Now, this is sort of a common practice in Solomon's day for people, individuals or groups of people, to travel to a shrine and make offerings and then sleep in front of the altar in hopes of obtaining a dream message from the God of that place. It's called a dream theophany, all right? It's just kind of a vision of God from that place. And so that appears to be what Solomon is doing. He's offering these sacrifices and then going to sleep in front of the altar in hopes of being visited by God. So, in other words, the scene we've stumbled upon here is where Solomon has come specifically to petition God. It's not just a random wish granting. It's not just that Solomon happened to fall asleep this day, and then he had this visitation from God. No, Solomon has come here to this place to ask God for help with something, and God says to Solomon, okay, what do you want? Now, let's go back to verse 6 here. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Verse 7, now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king, that's him, Solomon, in place of my father David. But I'm only a little child, and I don't know how to carry out my duties. So your servant here is among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or to number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? In other words, I'm kind of a young king here. I don't know everything I need to know in order to be a good ruler. Help me out a little bit. Verse 10, the Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. Now, Solomon gets a dream here. He asks God for wisdom to be able to rule his people as he is a young king. But unlike my dream, it appears to be a real occurrence for him. God speaks and offers him anything, and Solomon, of course, chooses the idea of wisdom, and that is our topic today. Now, there's two parts to wisdom here that we're going to learn about over the next few weeks. If we're going to define what does it mean to be wise or what is wisdom, there's really two parts to wisdom. And the first part is knowing the right thing to do. The first part of wisdom is you have to find out what is the right thing to do. Not just what do I want to do, but what is the right thing to do? What does God want me to do? And this is going to involve a little bit of discernment because sometimes there's some hard choices to make. And so there might need to be some discernment here as you try to find out or know what is the right thing to do. And how do you do the right thing? How do you even define what is the right thing? The right thing for who? For you? Your family? Your friends? Lots of people might have their own definition of what is right. But the right thing in our biblical terms here for Solomon and throughout the rest of the Bible, the right thing is what we would call the righteous thing. And this word righteousness, we've discussed this in other sermon series, but this word righteousness, when we come across it in the Bible material, is better translated probably, or at least equally translated, justice. In fact, you could replace the word righteousness with justice in almost every circumstance. And I would argue that understanding righteousness as justice actually helps us 2,000 years later and more understand what the meaning or the significance of this word means a little better. Because doing the righteous thing, the wise thing, means doing the thing that does justice to all, that does good to all, that brings justice to everyone. In other words, it means doing what is fair, treating people equally, protecting the vulnerable, holding those in power accountable. Justice, okay? That is what it means to do the right thing. Now, you say, well, wisdom means that you're smart, right? Well, you could be smart and you could do a lot of smart things. And that smart thinking and way of doing things might lead to a lot of money, and you might have a lot of fame, and you might become very successful. But you could do all those things and be very smart, but not do the righteous thing, not care about justice. And so being smart might help with wisdom. It might help you to know what is just, but it's not just about being smart. It's about trying to find out which decision is just, fair, and good. And once you figure that out, the next part of wisdom is actually doing it, okay? You can't just know the right thing to do. You have to do it. Knowing the right thing to do and not doing it is actually foolish. If you know the right thing to do, that doesn't really make you wise. It just makes you informed. Knowing the right thing to do isn't enough in order to have wisdom. You also have to do it. And if you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, well, that's actually the opposite of wisdom. That's just foolishness. So Solomon here, he actually asks God for the ability to know the right thing to do, finding out what you should do. But the last part of actually doing it, well, that's up to Solomon, isn't it? Solomon is actually going to have to choose that part himself. God can't do that for him. That's not really a wish that God can grant. You know, I mean, he can help Solomon know what is the right thing to do, but ultimately in life, Solomon is going to have to choose to do that thing. And it's only when he chooses to do that thing that he is really going to embrace wisdom. Now, Solomon, it turns out, even though this goes in the face of the video a little bit that we just watched, Solomon was rather unequal in his application of this. He may have often known the right thing to do, but he certainly did not always do it. And Solomon makes some good decisions in his life, but he makes some really bad ones too. And the irony is, the wisest man, you know, we call him the wisest man to ever live, Solomon, makes some really unwise choices. But it's not because he didn't know the right thing to do. He knew that better than anyone, I suppose. But it appears that sometimes he chose not to do it. So, wisdom is not just knowing the right thing to do, but also and critically choosing to actually do it. Now, it's important because life is made up of a lot of choices, isn't it? I mean, there's all sorts of choices. Some are big, some are little. There's little ones like, what shall I eat for dinner tonight? You know, it's always a big discussion in my house. Like, what are we going to eat? You know, and everybody has all these ideas and options, and it's hard to choose. Or what game to play? We were just out camping this week, and we're trying to decide what game to play, and it's hard to settle on one. Or what music you're going to listen to? You know, like when you're in the car, who's going to control the playlist and get to choose what music we're going to listen to? I find that restaurant menus are so difficult to me, especially when they're really big. You know, you go to like the Cheesecake Factory or something, and that menu is like an encyclopedia. There's so many choices. It just paralyzes me. So I like to get the same thing every time so I don't have to make these choices. But those are all little choices, right? But there are obviously much bigger choices in life, like where to live, or what career to choose, or how to handle tough relationships. And so there are little and big decisions in our life. And some of those choices are sort of easy to know what's the right thing to do. I mean, some of them are between good things and bad things. And those are kind of easy to know what's the right thing to do. Like, should I rob a bank or should I not rob a bank? All right, well, from a justice standpoint, it's pretty easy to decide that one. But some choices aren't between just good and bad things. A lot of choices in life are actually between good things and other good things. And that's where it gets kind of hard, because sometimes we're just trying to choose the better thing, but sometimes it appears that there might even be more than one good answer, and it could even be that God's okay with whichever one of them that you choose, as long as it is just, righteous, and good. But ultimately, we're going to have to make a lot of choices in our lives. Some easy, some not so easy. So how do we know what to do? Well, over the next couple weeks, we're going to be talking about how to make some good decisions. And part one is today. And I want to just give you 3 kind of simple things that we can use to help make decisions. And these come right out of the children's ministry curriculum, but I think they're spot on and they're really good for adults and for kids. And here's the first one: how to make good choices. Pray. Pray. Ask God to tell you what the best choice to make would be. That's what Solomon does here. He is asking for God's help, his input in making decisions in his life. He doesn't know how to rule or be a good leader because he's young and inexperienced. So he asks God for help. Show me the right thing to do. Show me how you, God, would lead these people. What he's asking here is help in being a just and good ruler. And I would suggest that that's maybe a good starting point for all of us, that we might want to embrace a humility and ask God for help in being a person who is just and good. And so the bottom line that comes from the children's ministry curriculum this month is, if you want to be wise, ask God for wisdom. And I think that's a pretty good little bottom line take home here. Now, James 1:5 says it this way: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. In other words, pray. Ask God for wisdom. Now, it seems obvious that people who say they would follow God would do this, but the truth is many of us adults still skip this part, don't we? We say, I got a big decision coming up, I need to pray about that. But do we? I think sometimes we don't. And so if you need to make a big decision, a big choice, there's a big decision in your life right now, pray about it. Don't make a big decision without consulting God. Now, the second good thing, I think, point here that the curriculum had is that we should ask trusted people for advice. And this is really good. And we're going to look at this more next week. But when I make decisions, big ones anyway, I like to ask some people in my life what they think about it. People, not just anyone, but some people who I really trust, like people like my parents, like maybe my dad, or I've got a friend named Milton who I would just run big life decisions by because he seems to be someone I could trust to tell me the truth about things. I had a really good friend named Rob who passed away a few years back, but anytime I had a big decision to make, I would run it by Rob. He was kind of one of my council of advisors because he was just so smart about everything, and he could think through different things and point out things in me that I didn't see, and just super, super helpful. Now, Solomon gets a group of counselors and advisors around him to help him rule. We're going to kind of look at that next week. But that is a great idea. You need a group of counselors and advisors in life. If you're an adult, I can't suggest to you enough finding a group of trusted friends or family members or whoever around you to help give input into your life when you make major decisions. But kids, I mean, in part, your parents are supposed to be this, right? I mean, that's why they're always telling you what to do, right? Because they have some insight into things that perhaps you don't have. And so as counselors, as advisors, they're there to help you learn how to make good decisions. And so the bottom line here is find trusted people who follow Jesus and get their advice. Now, the third thing that we want to point out here for how to make good decisions is to value doing what is right over everything else. And I have found that I usually make the worst decisions, the most bad decisions that I ever make are when I'm only thinking about myself. I think selfishness is probably the number one ingredient in me making a bad decision. When I start asking questions, well, it's not bad to ask these questions, but when it's the only question I'm asking about this decision is, how does this help me? What does this do to benefit me, right? It's when we begin asking questions like, can I make more money with this decision? Or will people like me more? When it's all kind of based around selfishness, or I'm preoccupied with only how this decision affects me. Now, wisdom values what is good for all more than only what is good for me. I may want to take into account what is good for me, but wisdom, remember, is about knowing the right thing to do, the righteous thing, the just thing, what is fair and equitable and good for all. And Solomon, well, he struggled with this. Initially, as we read in the story, he asked for wisdom to help others, to rule with justice. Remember that? Even God says it there in verse 11. He's pleased by it, since you've asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but you've asked for discernment in administering justice, right? That's what you've asked for, how to be a good ruler. Solomon didn't ask for fame and power and money and all that. He asked for being help in being a fair and good ruler, and God commended him for it. And so I love that phrase there at the end. You've asked for discernment in administering justice. You're asking for smarts in order to help others, to protect those who are vulnerable, to be a fair ruler. But over time, it appears that Solomon, well, he became less concerned with others and more selfish. In fact, it appears that he begins to use his position and all this wisdom to get stuff for himself at the expense of others. Now, we could spend a lot of time on this, but let me just give you a couple examples here. First of all, Solomon is the one who builds a temple for Yahweh. David wanted to, that's his dad. He couldn't get it done. Solomon gets the opportunity to build this temple for God. And he builds this beautiful temple for God, Yahweh, in Jerusalem. And that's a good idea. That doesn't seem selfish. You're building a temple for your God. Yet the last verse of 1 Kings 6 tells us how long it took Solomon to build that temple. And then the very next verse, the start of chapter 7, tells us how long it took Solomon to build his own house. Now look at this here. The end of 1 Kings 6, verse 38, the very end of it says, he was 7 years in building it, referring to the temple. And then the very next verse, which is chapter 7, verse 1, says, Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished his entire house. Now, it seems that the author here has placed these two things side by side to make a point. Solomon spent 7 years on God's house and 13 years on his own. And you say, well, maybe the palace had to be bigger because there's more administrators and all that kind of stuff. And that's probably true, but it takes nearly twice as long as the temple itself. And I think the authors or editors and redactors here have placed these side by side to make a point that at some point here, it seems like Solomon cares more about his own house than God's house. Now, you read more about this palace that Solomon built, and you discover it is full of gold and silver. I mean, it is very opulent. And I suppose you could say a king should have a nice house. I mean, nobody's going to take a king, a ruler of a country, seriously if he lives in a little tiny rambler down the street that's fallen all apart. I get that, right? But it seems like the authors and the editors of this material want us to see that perhaps this whole building of his palace thing has gotten a little bit out of control. Which, by the way, so has his personal life. Because it turns out that Solomon, we get reported, ends up with 700 wives. Now, I mean, that seems slightly above average for the amount of wives that one man normally has. Okay, just 700 seems a little above average in that regard. Okay, and so he has 700 wives. That is a lot of wives. And there's only one thing he had more of, and that is horses. 1 Kings 4, verse 26 says, Solomon also had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Wow. That is a lot, okay? So what I want you to see here is that Solomon ends up with a lot of horses, a lot of wives, and a lot of gold and silver. Pretty good life, but it's exactly what the text says is not good for a king. Now, we're going to read these verses here from Deuteronomy, and what you should know is that Deuteronomy and Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings are probably all compiled, written, and edited and compiled together by the same kind of group of authors and editors, and they have a particular slant. They're writing probably after the people of Israel have been hauled into captivity in Babylon and after that, and they're trying to explain why they ended up in captivity. And their main point here is that our kings were bad and led us into betrayal of God. And so it appears that they're trying to lay out this thing here that kings are usually doing the unrighteous thing that have led us somewhere that we needed to be hauled off into captivity. And notice what this Deuteronomistic author tells us here in Deuteronomy 17 about kings. It says, when you come into the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you may indeed set over you a king whom the Lord your God will choose. Even so, he must not, and here we go, okay, it seems very pointed at Solomon here. He must not acquire many horses for himself, or return the people to Egypt in order to acquire more horses, since the Lord has said to you, you must never return that way again. And he must not acquire many wives for himself, check, or else his heart will turn away. Also silver and gold he must not acquire in great quantity for himself, check again. Okay, so the text here says, you can't have lots of horses, you can't have lots of wives, and you shouldn't have lots of gold and silver. I mean, those are the three no-nos for a king. And I think the author and editors here wants to see that Solomon violated all of them. He became a very rich king, but that was unwise. And I think the text is going out of its way here in 1 Kings chapters 3 through 8 or so to show us that Solomon actually became one of the most unwise kings in Israel's history. You say, well, why is it a problem that he got all these things? Well, wisdom isn't about being smart, remember? Wisdom is about doing what is right. Righteousness, justice, doing what is right by all. And if you're smart and you only use it to get things for yourself, that's not wisdom, that's just simply greed. Wisdom values justice and righteousness above everything. It works for the good of all. And Solomon became rich, but also very foolish. He chose to forsake wisdom. And I think in his life later, he regrets it. In Proverbs 8, which is sort of the, Proverbs 8, which is sort of the theme verse of the month. Some have attributed this to Solomon himself as an older man, who says, "Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom," remember, knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it, "is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her." I think that as an old man, Solomon looked back on his life and realized that he'd made a good decision as a young man to ask for wisdom, that he really cared about being a just and good and fair ruler. But later he screwed it up. He got all caught up in achieving gold and silver and rubies and wealth and everything else, and he ended up valuing the wrong things. And so later in his life, he instructs people to value wisdom instead. And so maybe that's a good place to end. What is it that you value? Do you care what people think more than what God thinks? Do you value having nice things more than being generous to others who have needs? Do you value having power to control people more than sacrificing your life for the sake of others? What do you value? That is a good question when making decisions. What am I valuing above all in this decision? Solomon, as a young king, was given a chance to ask for anything from God. And as an old man, I believe he looks back and he has some regrets. I think if he could have that wish again as an old man, he might wish to go back in time and do things differently, to actually choose to live in the wisdom that he asked for initially. And so let me suggest that let's not live life with regrets like that. I know I'm not a king, and neither are you, and we're not presidents, or probably most of us aren't CEOs, but the choices that we make do have real implications for others. Things that we do, choices we make, have ripple effects on others. So let's choose to do things that are good and fair for all. And as we approach an election season where we're choosing leaders to lead us, let's pray that our leaders lead from that perspective as well, of knowing the right, just, good thing, the fair things to do for all, and lean into it and do it. That is wisdom. Now, we're going to go to communion here. We just have a little communion video that's going to play, and if you would like to take communion, you could do that. All you have to do is get together a couple items here. You might need something for the bread and for the cup. Now, in our in-person gatherings, we get all that stuff together for you. But in the online place here, you'll have to just kind of get something for the bread. It could be a little chunk of bread or a little cracker would work. And then for the cup, you just need something like a little bit of juice or maybe some wine left over from last night's dinner. If you want to get those things out, you can participate in communion here with us, even online. I know it's weird, we're online, but you can still do it there. And what we do is we remember the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus. We remember that God himself chooses to do the thing that is just. He comes down to this planet. He gives his life for all. He does good to all. And he lays down his life, even though he could have kept everything on his own. He could have ruled over us and just collected everything and just stayed in opulence and wealth. He chooses to empty himself out of love for us. And so we are thankful for that, but also we want to model our lives after it. Ultimately, true wisdom means doing things that look like Jesus himself. And so we want to celebrate that today, and we also want to be inspired by it to live likewise. So let me pray for us, and then we'll go to communion, and we'll wrap the whole thing up with some announcements at the end. God, thanks so much for today, for helping us to step into this little discussion about wisdom. Thanks for the example we have of Solomon, both good and bad, a person who was flawed, just as we're flawed, who sometimes made wise decisions and sometimes made very unwise decisions, just as we do. God, we pray that you would help us to be people who choose to do wise things. Help us to know the things that are right and just and good and fair, and then help us to do those things. Forgive us for the times when we do things that are selfish and benefit only ourselves. Sometimes even things that intentionally harm other people in order to help ourselves. We pray that you would help us to become the kind of people that instead do things that are just and fair for all. We thank you that you have come and died for all, that you love all, that you accept all, and invite us all into a new way to live. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, let's go to communion, and I'll see you for announcements right afterwards. All right, that's great. Let me give you some announcements here as we wrap up. First of all, you can always join us in person on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. We meet at the Zion Lutheran Church property in Everett, which is just south of Forest Park. It is off the 41st Street exit in Everett and easy to get to off the freeway. If you're ever able to join us in person, we would love to have you. I think you'd enjoy getting to know how these groups are working together. Good way to stay up to date with things that are happening. You can follow us on the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Look us up at The Gathering Everett, and you can keep up to date with some announcements and things that are happening. Another way to do that is through our email newsletter. You can sign up for our newsletter by messaging us your name and your email address. You can message us on Facebook or email me. My email's on the screen. You could take a little screenshot of that if you would like, and message us and let us know, and we would be happy to add you to our mailing list. Now, students are meeting tonight, 6th to 12th graders, junior high and high school. They're meeting at 6 p.m. downstairs for some games, some snacks, and some small group discussion. And so if you are of that age, you are welcome to join them. And then this Tuesday at 6:30 to 8 p.m., we're meeting in the parking lot at the church and participating in the Neighborhood Night Out. This is kind of a national program that goes on across the country. We're going to have the police and the fire department there, and we're going to have ice cream and games, and it's just a chance for the neighborhood to come together, to get to know each other a little better. And so we'll be doing that from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's free, and you are welcome to join us there if you would like to do that. As I said, this month of August is Family Month, so we're going to have 2 more messages in this little series on wisdom, and we'll be doing that. And if you show up in our in-person gatherings, first graders and up will be joining our adult gathering, and we have all sorts of supplies and stuff for them to color and do other things as they're in there with us during that time. Coming up at the end of August, August 25th, we are doing our park day at Forest Park, which is only a couple blocks from the church building, actually. We're going to meet at 11 a.m. and go till about 2 p.m. We're going to grill up some proteins, burgers, dogs, that type of thing. But if you want to bring side dishes like salads and chips and desserts and stuff like that to share, that would be great. We'll also have drinks there. And also if you want to bring like yard games, like bocce ball or cornhole or a badminton net or whatever else, there's a beautiful little park spot there. We can set those things up. There's also an incredible playground and a splash pad, so it'll be a fun time together. And if you would like to join us, there will be a small 10 a.m. worship service, more liturgical, formal style, at 10 a.m. And those who would like to do that can do that first and then head over to the park. It's only a couple blocks away. Then finally, if you'd like to give, you can do that online. You can go to our website at everettgathering.com/donate, and you can set up a one-time gift or a recurring gift. And I want to thank so many of you already who are donating. It's fantastic. We really appreciate that. We're kind of trying to do some things here in our neighborhood as an inclusive and more progressive church that there just aren't a lot of options out there for some people. And so this is a really, really beautiful and amazing community to give to, and we want to thank those of you who are doing that. Okay, I think that's it for today. So, as I said, hopefully get out there, enjoy some summer, enjoy some fun out there. It's been glorious, and hopefully your family is having a good time too this summer break. And next week we'll pick up right where we left off and talking about how to make good decisions and approaching wisdom. Okay, that's it. I hope you have a good one. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.